I only wanted to surprise my son-in-law, but when I saw my wife's car outside and secretly listened through the window, I thought I had uncovered the ultimate betrayal. The truth, however, left me in tears. Watch until the end, and don't forget to subscribe for more unforgettable true life stories.
I never imagined that an ordinary afternoon drive would become the moment that shattered everything I thought I knew about my family. My name is Richard. I'm 68 years old, retired after working more than 40 years as an electrical engineer. My wife Helen and I had been married for 39 years. We weren't the kind of couple who held hands in public or posted romantic messages online, but I believed we had something stronger than that. Trust. At least, that's what I believed. That Tuesday afternoon, I had just finished having lunch with an old friend across town. On my way home, I realized I was only a few streets away from my son-in-law Daniel's neighborhood. Daniel had married my daughter Emily 6 years earlier. Emily was away on a business conference in Chicago for the week, but Daniel had stayed behind because of work. He and I had always gotten along well. We talked about fishing, sports, home improvement projects, normal things. I thought it would be a nice surprise. I even stopped at a bakery and bought his favorite apple pie. It was such a small gesture. Funny how the smallest decisions sometimes lead to the biggest discoveries. As I turned onto Daniel Street, something immediately caught my attention. There, parked just outside his front gate, was my wife's silver SUV. I slowed my car. For a second, I smiled. Helen must have come to check on Daniel, I whispered to myself. After all, she often treated Daniel like the son she never had. There wasn't anything strange about that. At least, not yet. I parked my car about 50 yards away and grabbed the pie from the passenger seat. But something felt off. Helen had told me that morning she was spending the afternoon shopping with one of her friends across town. She even joked that she'd probably come home with more flowers for the garden. Why was she here? Maybe shopping had ended early. Maybe she was simply dropping something off. I kept walking toward the house. Then I noticed something else. The curtains in the living room were completely closed. Daniel never closed those curtains during the day. Never. His truck was in the driveway. Helen's SUV was by the gate. But no one answered when I rang the doorbell. I waited. Nothing. I pressed it again. Still silence. That was unusual. Daniel always answered his phone or the door within seconds. I reached for my phone to call him. Then I stopped. I heard voices, very faint, coming from inside. Someone was talking. I couldn't make out the words. I walked around the side of the house, thinking maybe they were in the backyard, but the voices became clearer near the living room window. The window wasn't completely shut, just open enough for sound to slip through. I wasn't trying to spy. Honestly, I wasn't. I simply wanted to know why they weren't answering. Then I heard Helen's voice, soft, calm, almost comforting. I don't think he suspects anything. My heart skipped. I froze where I stood. Daniel answered quietly. He trusts you more than anyone. There was a long silence. Then Helen sighed. I know, and that's exactly why I feel guilty. My hands tightened around the pie box. Guilty? About what? 100 thoughts raced through my mind. Was someone sick? Were they planning a surprise birthday party? Had Emily gotten into trouble? I searched desperately for an innocent explanation, because the alternative was too painful to even imagine. Daniel spoke again. We can't keep hiding this forever. Hide what? Helen answered almost immediately. We don't have a choice. If Richard ever finds out now, everything we've worked for will fall apart. My breathing became shallow. They were talking about me. There was no mistake. I was Richard. Everything we've worked for? Find out what? The pie slipped slightly in my hands. I barely caught it before it hit the ground. Inside the house, neither of them seemed to notice. Daniel lowered his voice. I hate lying to him. Helen replied. I hate it too. Another pause. Then she said something that made my blood run cold. But after all these years, we're too close to stop now. I couldn't believe my ears. Too close? Too close to what? Every terrible possibility raced through my head. Was my wife having an affair with my own son-in-law? No, no, that couldn't be true. Daniel loved Emily. Helen loved me. Didn't they? I wanted to burst through the front door, demand answers, force them to explain every word I'd just heard. Instead, I stayed perfectly still. Years of experience had taught me one thing. People reveal far more when they think no one is listening. Inside the house, chairs scraped across the floor. Someone stood up. My pulse exploded. Were they coming outside? I stepped back behind a tall maple tree beside the fence. A few seconds later, the front door opened. Daniel walked onto the porch alone. He looked around the neighborhood, not casually, carefully, almost as if he wanted to make sure nobody was watching. My heart pounded so loudly I was certain he could hear it. After another few moments, he went back inside. I slowly returned to the window. Helen was now standing beside the fireplace. She looked worried, older than she had that morning. She rubbed her forehead and said quietly, "I never wanted it to happen this way." Daniel answered, "Neither did I." Then he reached into a drawer and pulled out a thick brown envelope. He placed it on the coffee table between them. Helen stared at it for several seconds without touching it. Finally, she whispered, "If Richard ever opens this, he'll never forgive either of us." At that exact moment, every instinct told me that whatever was inside that envelope had the power to destroy my family forever. And without realizing it, I took one small step closer to the window, desperate to hear the next sentence. But before I could make out another word, I heard the unmistakable sound of footsteps moving directly towards the window where I was standing. The footsteps grew louder with every passing second. I barely had enough time to move away from the window before the curtains suddenly shifted. Someone was standing on the other side. I held my breath. For what felt like an eternity, nobody spoke. Then the curtain slowly fell back into place. Whoever had looked outside hadn't seen me. I remained hidden behind the maple tree, my heart pounding so violently that my chest actually hurt. A moment later, I heard Helen's voice again. "I thought I saw something." Daniel answered calmly, "Probably just a neighbor walking by." The front door closed once more. Only then did I slowly breathe again. I couldn't risk standing near the window anymore. Instead, I quietly walked along the side of the house until I reached the backyard. Daniel's fence wasn't very high, and through the wooden slates I could still hear fragments of their conversation whenever they raised their voices. I knew I should leave. Every decent husband would have walked straight through that front door and demanded the truth, but something inside me whispered that I needed to hear everything before confronting them. Because once accusations were made, there would be no turning back. Inside the house, Helen sounded exhausted. "Richard has trusted me with every decision for nearly 40 years. Daniel replied softly, "That's exactly why this is so difficult." Again, neither of them sounded angry. Neither sounded romantic. There were no whispers of love, no flirting, nothing that suggested an affair. Yet their words carried a weight that terrified me even more. Whatever secret they were hiding, it wasn't small. Helen continued, "If we tell him now, he'll never understand why we waited." Daniel sighed. "He deserves the truth." "I know." "Then why don't we tell him tonight?" There was another long silence. Finally, Helen answered, "Because we're still missing one piece." "One piece? What piece?" My mind raced. Were they talking about money? A legal document? A medical diagnosis? An inheritance? I couldn't fit the puzzle together. Every clue seemed to point in a different direction. Suddenly, I heard the sound of paper sliding across a table. Daniel spoke first. "I finally received these yesterday." Helen asked nervously, "Did you read all of them?" "Every page." "And?" Daniel hesitated. "Some of it is worse than we expected." My stomach tightened. "Worse?" Helen covered her face. "Oh, Richard." Hearing my own name spoken with such sadness confused me more than anything else. If they were betraying me, why did they sound heartbroken? Why did Helen sound as though she was about to cry? Another minute passed in silence. Then Daniel cleared his throat. "I still think he should be the one to decide." Helen shook her head. "No. He deserves it." "No, Daniel. He'll blame himself." Helen's voice cracked. "And he already blames himself for too many things." Those words echoed inside my mind. Blames himself? For what? I hadn't blamed myself for anything recently. At least, not that I could remember. Daniel stood up. I heard footsteps moving toward the kitchen. A cabinet opened. Glasses clinked together. When he returned, Helen quietly thanked him. She must have taken a sip of water before speaking again. "Emily can't know." Daniel immediately answered, "I haven't told her anything. Promise me." "I promise." That sentence hit me almost as hard as everything else. Now my own daughter was being kept in the dark. Whatever secret this was, it involved the entire family. And yet somehow I was the only person completely unaware of it. A cool breeze swept across the backyard. For the first time, I noticed that my hands were trembling. The apple pie was still in my grip. The box had become crushed under my fingers without me even realizing it. I looked down at it. Just an hour ago, I had been excited about sharing dessert with my son-in-law. Now, it felt like something from another lifetime. Inside, Helen suddenly laughed. Not a joyful laugh, the kind of laugh people make when they're trying not to cry. "Do you remember the first time Richard met you?" Daniel chuckled. "He interrogated me for almost 3 hours." Helen smiled. "He was trying to protect Emily. And now," Daniel stopped speaking. Helen finished the sentence for him. "And now we're trying to protect him." Protect me? From what? I couldn't make sense of anything anymore. Nothing fit together. Then came the sentence that made every hair on my arm stand up. Daniel lowered his voice. "The investigator said he'll have the final report by Friday." Investigator? I frowned. Why would they need an investigator? Helen asked quietly, "Do you trust him?" "I do." "And if he's right?" Daniel didn't answer immediately. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "Then Richard has been living with a lie for decades." My knees nearly gave out beneath me. Living with a lie? For decades? I leaned against the fence to keep myself from falling. Every memory of my marriage, every family vacation, every birthday, every Christmas suddenly felt uncertain. Was my entire life built on something false? Or were they mistaken? I desperately wanted to believe there had to be another explanation. Then I heard a phone ringing inside the house. Helen answered it. "Hello?" Her face changed instantly. "What?" Daniel stood up. "What happened?" Helen listened silently for nearly 30 seconds. When she finally spoke again, her voice had become pale with shock. "Are you absolutely certain?" Another pause. "I understand." She ended the call and slowly lowered the phone. Daniel looked terrified. What did they say? Helen stared at the floor. Her lips trembled. The report. She swallowed hard. It came back early. Daniel's face turned white. And? Helen looked directly at the brown envelope lying on the coffee table. Without saying another word, she reached for it with shaking hands. I instinctively moved closer to hear what was inside, but just as I took another careful step, my foot landed on a dry branch hidden beneath the grass. Crack. The sound echoed through the quiet backyard. Inside the house, everything went completely silent. Then I heard Daniel say only 4 chilling words. "Someone's outside the house."
The moment Daniel said someone's outside the house, my entire body locked in place. Every instinct screamed at me to run. Instead, I forced myself to stay calm. If I started running now, they would know someone had been listening. Slowly, I crouched behind the fence and remained perfectly still. For several long seconds, I heard nothing. Then the back door opened. I could hear Daniel's footsteps crossing the wooden deck. Each step came closer, closer, closer. I could even hear the boards creaking beneath his weight.
I pressed myself against the fence, barely daring to breathe. If he walked just another 10 feet, he would see me. Then, a dog barked loudly from the neighboring house. Daniel stopped. He looked toward the neighboring yard instead. Another bark echoed down the street. After another minute of searching, he muttered to himself, probably just the dog again. The back door closed. Only then did I realize I had been holding my breath the entire time. I slowly exhaled. My shirt was soaked with sweat, despite the cool afternoon breeze. I knew I couldn't stay there forever. If they came outside together, there would be no place left to hide. Carefully, I walked around the side of the fence and returned to my car without making another sound. The crushed apple pie still sat under my arm. I placed it on the passenger seat and stared through the windshield. I didn't start the engine. I couldn't. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. For nearly 15 minutes, I remained parked at the end of the street. Thought after thought crashed through my mind. Should I confront them? Should I call Helen? Should I tell Emily? Should I pretend I never came? Nothing made sense. Then the front door finally opened. I lowered myself slightly in my seat. Daniel stepped outside first. He carried the mysterious brown envelope. Helen followed him. She looked around the neighborhood one more time before quietly saying, "Make sure nobody else sees it." Daniel nodded. "A locket in the safe." Safe? Now they were putting the envelope inside a safe. Whatever was inside clearly wasn't ordinary paperwork. Daniel disappeared back into the house for less than a minute before returning empty-handed. Helen walked toward her SUV. Before getting inside, she suddenly placed a hand on Daniel's shoulder. "Remember, if anything happens to me," Daniel interrupted immediately. "Don't talk like that. You promised." "I know. You'll give everything to Richard." "Everything?" My heartbeat quickened again. Give me everything? What exactly was she talking about? Daniel looked genuinely emotional. I just wish we didn't have to keep lying. Helen forced a weak smile. Sometimes protecting someone means carrying the burden yourself. She climbed into her SUV. Moments later, she drove away. I waited until her vehicle disappeared around the corner before starting my own. Without thinking, I began following her. Not closely, just far enough away that she wouldn't notice. The woman I'd shared almost 38 years with had suddenly become a complete stranger. She didn't drive toward the shopping district. She didn't drive home. Instead, she headed across town towards an older part of the city. Traffic became heavier. I stayed 3 or 4 cars behind. Eventually, she pulled into the parking lot of a small brick building. There was no store, no restaurant, no cafe. Just a quiet office building with a simple sign near the entrance. From where I was parked, I couldn't read the entire name, but one word stood out clearly. Legal. A law office. Helen stepped out carrying her purse, but nothing else. She looked around nervously before walking inside. I checked the time. 3:27. She remained inside for nearly 40 minutes. 40 long minutes. Questions kept circling through my mind. Was she changing a will? Signing divorce papers? Handling some secret inheritance? When she finally came back outside, she wasn't alone. An older man in a dark suit walked beside her. They shook hands. The man handed her a thin blue folder. She thanked him quietly before getting back into her SUV. I stayed hidden until she left. Then curiosity got the better of me. I walked toward the office entrance. The sign beside the door read, Harrison and Cole, Family Law and Estate Services. Estate Services. Those words echoed inside my mind. Estate.
Inheritance, wills, trusts. Suddenly, the brown envelope flashed through my memory. Could all of this be about my estate? No, that still didn't explain the investigator, or the reports, or decades of lies. Nothing fit. I stepped back to my car before anyone inside noticed me. Driving home felt different. Every familiar street suddenly seemed unfamiliar. Every memory with Helen replayed in my head. The vacations, the anniversaries, the nights we'd stayed awake planning our retirement. Had any of it been real? Or had she been carrying this secret all along? When I finally reached home, Helen's SUV was already parked in the driveway. She had beaten me home by only a few minutes. I sat in my car watching the front door. Eventually, it opened. Helen smiled exactly the same way she always did. Warm, gentle, natural. If I hadn't overheard everything earlier, I never would have guessed she was hiding anything. She waved at me. "There you are." I forced a smile. "Traffic." She laughed. "I was just about to start dinner." Her voice sounded completely normal. Not nervous, not guilty. Normal. That frightened me more than anything. How could someone hide such enormous secrets so effortlessly? As we walked inside together, I noticed something unusual. Helen kept glancing toward the hallway table, almost as if she was checking whether something was still there. After dinner, she excused herself for a moment and walked upstairs. The instant she disappeared, my eyes drifted toward that same hallway table. There, sitting beneath a stack of unopened mail, was a single folded document with the exact same blue cover I'd seen the lawyer hand her less than an hour ago. Without thinking, I reached toward it. Just as my fingertips touched the edge of the folder, I heard Helen's voice from the top of the staircase. "Richard." My heart nearly stopped. Slowly, I turned around.
Richard. Helen's voice was calm, but I could hear the concern hidden beneath it. I slowly removed my hand from the blue folder and turned toward the staircase. She stood there silently, studying my face. For a brief moment, neither of us spoke. Then she smiled. "I thought you might be looking for today's mail." I forced myself to smile back. I was. She walked downstairs, picked up the folder before I could see the cover clearly, and tucked it under her arm. "I'll put this in the study later." She disappeared upstairs once again. That night, neither of us slept much. Or at least, I didn't. Every time Helen turned over in bed, I wondered what she was thinking. Every time she sighed, I wondered whether she knew I had followed her. The next morning, she left unusually early. The moment her car disappeared from the driveway, I made a decision. For the first time in our marriage, I unlocked the drawer of her desk. I wasn't proud of it, but I needed answers. Inside were ordinary things: old photographs, greeting cards, insurance papers. Nothing unusual. Then, underneath a stack of notebooks, I found a small key taped inside the drawer, a tiny brass key. I recognized it immediately. It belonged to the old safe in our basement, the safe we hadn't opened in years. I hurried downstairs. The safe stood exactly where it always had. With trembling hands, I inserted the key. The lock clicked. Inside were only 3 things: a photo album, the same brown envelope I had seen at Daniel's house, and a sealed letter. On the front, written in Helen's handwriting, were the words, "For Richard, only if I cannot tell you myself." My heart pounded. I opened the brown envelope first. Inside were investigative reports, DNA records, old hospital documents, birth certificates. I sat on the basement floor as page after page answered every question.
38 years ago, shortly after Emily was born, doctors had quietly informed Helen that I carried a rare genetic condition that could suddenly become life-threatening later in life. The medical tests available back then had been incomplete. Years later, advances in medicine suggested that the original diagnosis might have been wrong. Helen had secretly hired investigators and medical specialists to recover forgotten hospital records and confirm the truth before telling me. She hadn't wanted to frighten me with uncertainty. Daniel had helped her because he knew how much Emily loved her father. The investigators' final report had arrived that very afternoon. I unfolded the last page. My eyes filled with tears. The original diagnosis had been wrong. For almost 38 years, Helen lived every single day believing she might lose me at any moment. Yet she never treated me like I was dying. She encouraged me to travel, to laugh, to chase every dream. She carried the fear alone so I could live without it. I looked toward the sealed letter. My hands shook as I carefully opened it. Inside was only one handwritten page. It read, "My dearest Richard, if you're reading this, then something happened before I found the courage to tell you everything. You once asked me what love really means. I never answered because I didn't know how. Now I do. Love is protecting someone's smile, even if it costs you your own peace. For 38 years, I watched every birthday with gratitude because I wasn't sure there would be another. Every vacation photograph became precious. Every Christmas dinner felt like a miracle. You often thanked me for making my life happy. The truth is, you were the one who made mine beautiful. The new report says the doctors were wrong. You're healthy. You're going to grow old with me after all. I've dreamed of hearing those words for decades. Please don't be angry that I kept this from you. I wasn't hiding the truth because I didn't trust you. I was carrying the fear because I loved you more than myself. Forever yours, Helen." By the time I reached the last sentence, I couldn't see the paper anymore. My tears had blurred every word. At that moment, the front door opened upstairs. "Honey?" Helen called softly. "I forgot my purse." I wiped my eyes and slowly climbed the basement stairs. When she saw the open letter in my hands, she stopped walking. For a moment, neither of us said anything. Then tears filled her eyes. "I'm sorry," she whispered. I walked toward her. I didn't ask why. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't accuse her. Instead, I wrapped my arms around the woman who had spent 38 years silently carrying a burden she believed would protect me. She broke down crying. "So, you know everything?" I nodded. "I know enough." She looked at me through her tears. "Are you angry?" I gently shook my head. "No. I just wish you hadn't carried it alone." For the first time in many years, we both cried together. Not because our family had been broken, but because the truth had finally set us free. Later that evening, Daniel and Emily came over. No one spoke about investigations. No one mentioned secrets. Instead, we shared the slightly crushed apple pie that had been sitting in my car the day everything changed. As we laughed around the dinner table, I realized something I would never forget. Sometimes, what sounds like betrayal from outside a window is actually love making the hardest sacrifice behind a closed door. And sometimes, the greatest gift isn't discovering a secret. It's discovering why someone kept it.